The bell above the door jingled as James stepped into the diner, the familiar warmth of the place greeting him. It was a small, cozy spot, nothing fancy, just a place that had good food and a quiet atmosphere. James, the kind of man who was always busy, had decided to take a break from his high-pressure life. He wasn't in the mood for one of his usual fine dining spots. Today, he just wanted a moment of peace. He wheeled his son, Ethan, through the door. Ethan had been in a wheelchair for most of his life due to a disability that had left him unable to walk or even move much on his own. It had been a long, hard road for both father and son, but they had learned to live with it. James had done everything in his power to give Ethan a life full of experiences just as rich and fulfilling as any other child's life. But still, it wasn't easy. They had been to countless hospitals, met dozens of doctors, and tried nearly every treatment under the sun. Yet Ethan's condition remained the same. As they settled into their booth, James noticed the waitress working her way around the tables. She was young, maybe in her 20s, and she moved quickly, taking orders. With a smile on her face, despite the busy diner, she seemed to handle it all effortlessly, like she had been doing this job for years. She was kind, quick-witted, and more importantly, she had a way about her that made people feel at ease. When she reached their table, she smiled at Ethan, who was fiddling with his napkin. "What can I get you today?" she asked in a soft voice, the kind that put anyone in a good mood instantly. Ethan looked up, his eyes twinkling as he looked at the menu. "I'll have the chicken strips," he said, his voice a little raspy. "Good choice," she replied, her smile widening. "And you, sir?" She turned her gaze to James, who was already scanning the menu. "Just a coffee, thank you," James said, his voice low but kind. As she wrote down the order, Ethan knocked over his glass of water, spilling it all over the table. He looked up at her, his face filled with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his hands fumbling to pick up the glass. But before he could react, the waitress was already there, quickly grabbing some napkins and starting to clean up the mess. "Don't worry about it," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "It happens all the time." She didn't rush through it. She took her time, making sure Ethan was comfortable. James watched quietly, impressed by how easily she dealt with the situation. There was no irritation in her voice, no rushed movements. It was as if she genuinely cared about making sure both father and son were okay. When she finished cleaning the table, she gave Ethan a friendly pat on the shoulder. "There we go, all clean," she said with a soft laugh. "It's just water, nothing to worry about." James smiled at her, grateful for the kindness. "Thank you," he said sincerely. She gave him a quick nod before heading off to another table. But James couldn't help but watch her for a moment, taken by how effortlessly she had handled the situation. There was something about her, something different. Most waitstaff would have been irritated at the spilled water, but not her. She was calm, almost as if it were second nature to her. After finishing their meal, James paid the bill and made sure to leave a generous tip. As he got up to leave, he turned to look at her again. She was standing by the counter, chatting with a few regulars, her laughter filling the room. He hesitated for a moment before walking up to her. "Excuse me," James said, catching her attention. "I just wanted to say that you handled that very well. It wasn't a big deal, but the way you took care of it, it's rare to see that kind of kindness." The waitress blinked, clearly surprised by the compliment. She smiled shyly. "Oh, it's no problem at all. I've seen my fair share of spills." James chuckled lightly, then decided to take a chance. "Well, I'm a business owner," he began, not sure how this would be received. "I run a few charity events, and I've been looking for someone to help me organize them. You've got the kind of attitude I'm looking for. Would you be interested in learning more?" The waitress paused, looking at him curiously. She had been offered odd jobs before, but something about the way James spoke made her think twice. She had never been particularly ambitious, but the idea of being able to help people in a larger way was appealing. "I'm not sure," she replied cautiously. "I've never done anything like that before." James smiled, trying to put her at ease. "No pressure, just think about it. I believe you have something special to offer. If you're interested, I'd be happy to discuss it further." With that, He gave her a small nod and walked out, leaving her to ponder what he had said. She stood there for a moment, the sounds of the diner fading around her as she thought about the offer. It was unexpected, but it was something that could change everything for her. As she went back to work, she couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the beginning of something bigger than she ever imagined. The phone rang early the next morning. Maria hesitated before picking it up, unsure of who could be calling her at this hour. When she saw the unfamiliar number on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. "Hello," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hi, is this Maria?" The voice on the other end was professional, calm, but with a sense of urgency. "This is James, Bradford's assistant. He wanted to speak with you about a potential opportunity." Maria blinked, the words slowly sinking in. The offer from James the previous day wasn't just a polite suggestion, it was real. Her mind raced with questions. What kind of opportunity? Was this some kind of mistake? But before she could ask, the assistant continued, "He'd like to meet you at his office today at 2 p.m. to discuss it further. Will that work for you?" After a long pause, Maria managed to answer, Yes, that works." The line went silent for a moment, and then the assistant spoke again. "Great, we'll see you then, goodbye." Maria sat there for a few seconds, the phone still pressed against her ear. She couldn't believe it. She had no idea what she was walking into, but something told her this wasn't just another job. This was something different. By the time 2 p.m. rolled around, Maria had convinced herself to go. Her nerves were running wild, but she knew she couldn't back out now. She stood in front of the sleek, modern building where James worked, the glass walls towering over her, making her feel small. It was hard to imagine a man like James being in the same world as her, someone who spent his days in a place like this, a world of power and wealth. But here she was, standing in front of it, trying to ignore the unease gnawing at her. After a quick check of her reflection in the building's glass door, Maria walked inside. The receptionist greeted her with a smile and led her to a waiting area. It was quieter here, with soft lighting and elegant furniture that made her feel out of place. As she waited, her mind wandered. She thought about her life, her routine, the diner, and her mother back home. She wasn't used to all of this, these fancy offices, the polished people, the promises of a different future. It felt like a dream that she could wake up from at any moment. But the dream didn't end there. When James finally walked into the room, Maria nearly froze. His presence filled the space, even before he spoke. He wasn't like other businessmen. He had an air about him, a kind of quiet confidence that was different from arrogance. His smile was warm, genuine, and it immediately put her at ease. "Maria." He greeted her, offering his hand. "It's nice to finally meet you in person." She shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip. "Nice to meet you too." He motioned for her to sit down, and as she did, he took the chair across from her. His office was just as impressive as the building, sleek, modern, with walls adorned by beautiful artwork. It was the kind of space that told you everything you needed to know about its owner. "I'm sure you're wondering what this is all about," James began, his tone casual, yet thoughtful. "To be honest, I've been impressed by your work ethic at the diner. The way you handled yourself yesterday, it's not something you see every day. And I've been looking for someone who can take on a new project for me, something that's important." Maria's heart skipped a beat. A project. She wasn't sure what to expect. But it wasn't this. It was more than she could have imagined. James leaned forward slightly, as if he was about to share something personal. "I run a charity focused on helping children with disabilities, especially those who are in need of long-term care. It's a cause that's close to my heart, not just because of the charity itself, but because of my son, Ethan. He was born with a disability, and it's something I've dedicated a lot of my life to." Maria's mind immediately went to Ethan, the boy she had seen the day before. She remembered his shy smile, the way his father had looked after him. There was a tenderness in the way James spoke about his son, and Maria felt a sense of connection. To them both, "I need someone to help organize events, reach out to donors, and really bring this cause to the forefront." James continued, "I know you haven't worked in this kind of field before, but I think you could do it. I believe you have the right qualities: compassion, commitment, and a sense of integrity that's hard to find. Maria was stunned. The idea of being involved in something so meaningful, something that could truly make a difference, was more than she ever expected. She had always dreamed of helping others, but this was a chance to do something that could change lives, including her own. "I don't know what to say," Maria said, her voice quiet. "I've never done anything like this. I'm not sure if I'm the right person." James smiled again, this time with a reassuring warmth. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. What I'm asking is for you to take a chance, help me make a real difference. You can learn as you go. The important thing is that you care, and that's something I can't teach." The words hung in the air between them. Maria felt a strange pull, as though she were standing at the edge of something big, something life-changing. But she also felt fear, the fear of stepping out of her comfort zone, of taking a leap into the unknown. For a moment, she wasn't sure what to do. But then, she looked into James's eyes and saw the sincerity there. She didn't know where this would lead, but something inside her told her she couldn't walk away. "I'll do it," Maria said, her voice firm but a little unsure. "I'll give it a try." James's smile widened, and he stood up, extending his hand again. "Great. Welcome aboard, Maria. I think this is the beginning of something important." The next few weeks passed in a blur. Maria found herself juggling her old life at the diner with her new responsibilities at the charity. The transition was overwhelming, to say the least. Every morning, she woke up early to prepare for the busy hours ahead at the diner, and then, in the afternoons, she would head to the charity office to work alongside James and his team. It was a stark contrast, one world filled with the noisy chatter of customers and clinking glasses, the other with conference calls and serious discussions about fundraising, outreach, and the children they aimed to help. Despite the chaos, Maria felt alive in a way she never had before. The work was challenging, but it was also fulfilling. She found herself becoming more and more involved in the charity's projects, contributing ideas that she never thought she'd be capable of. And every time she was with James, whether in meetings or over casual dinners, she felt an undeniable pull between them. James was kind, compassionate, and always encouraging. He saw potential in her that she didn't see in herself. His quiet confidence was contagious, and slowly, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had what it took to succeed in this new world. But still, there was a distance between them. One evening, after another long day of planning for an upcoming fundraising gala, Maria found herself alone with James in the office. The others had left for the night, and the silence in the building was almost palpable. James was at his desk, his back to her as he scanned through a pile of papers. Maria stood by the window, looking out over the city lights, her thoughts swirling. She could feel the weight of the unsaid words hanging between them. "You've been doing great work." James's voice broke through the quiet, drawing her attention. He didn't turn to face her, but his words carried a warmth that made her heart race. "I've noticed how much you've stepped up these last few weeks. The event's shaping up to be one of our best yet." Maria smiled, though a hint of self-doubt lingered in her chest. "Thanks, but I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. It feels like I'm out of my depth sometimes." James stood up from his desk and turned to face her, the soft light from the desk lamp casting a glow on his features. There was something different in his eyes tonight, something more serious, more sincere. "You're doing more than just managing events, Maria," he said, stepping closer. "You're making a real impact, and I'm proud of you." His words lingered in the air, and Maria felt a flush rise to her cheeks. The way he said it so matter-of-factly made her feel like she was finally seen. Like all the hard work she had put in, the long hours, the sacrifice, was actually amounting to something meaningful. But as much as she wanted to believe it, there was still something inside her holding back, something she couldn't name. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. James smiled, but this time, it wasn't just the usual kind smile he gave everyone. It was different, more intimate. "You're welcome. You've earned it." They stood there for a moment, a kind of unspoken tension building between them. James's gaze didn't leave hers, and Maria felt a pull in her chest, something she had tried to ignore for weeks. She had told herself it was just admiration. He was her boss, after all, A kind, generous man who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. That had to be it. She couldn't afford to complicate things. But then, James took a step closer, his voice quieter now, more personal. "Maria, I've been meaning to tell you something." Her heart skipped a beat. Was he about to say something she had feared hearing? Was this just business, after all? Or had their growing connection become something more than that? She swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "What is it?" James looked down, as if gathering his thoughts. "I've been watching you, not just as a colleague, but as a person. You're someone special, Maria, and I need you to know that." Maria's breath caught in her throat. The words seemed to hang in the air, thick and heavy, and she didn't know what to make of them. She had always been cautious about mixing business with personal feelings, but there was something in his eyes that made her want to believe him. Before she could say anything, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, and the moment was broken. James stepped back, clearing his throat as he turned toward his desk again. "We'll talk more about it later," he said, as if nothing had happened. But Maria could still feel the weight of his words lingering in the quiet room. She didn't know what to think. Was he simply being kind, or was there something more behind his actions? The uncertainty made her head spin. She had come so far in such a short time, and now it seemed like everything was changing. She had gone from being a waitress at a diner to being part of something bigger, something that could reshape her life forever. But what did James really mean by what he said? Was it just a moment of encouragement, or was he starting to see her in a different light? As Maria left the office that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it was something that could change everything, and for the first time in a long time, Maria was afraid that the future she had built so carefully was about to take a turn. She wasn't prepared for the weeks that followed were a whirlwind. But for Maria, everything seemed to slow down when she was with James. The office, the charity work, the fundraiser events, they all blurred together in the background. What stood out most was the way James made her feel, not just as his colleague, but as someone who mattered. There was a connection between them that was impossible to ignore, and every time they spoke, it felt as though they were walking closer to something neither of them was ready to face. But when the pressure of the gala loomed closer, everything began to shift. The event was only days away, and Maria found herself more deeply involved in the planning than ever before. James was everywhere, driving meetings, making decisions, all while taking care of his son, Ethan, who had been struggling more with his health in recent weeks. It was clear to Maria that James was juggling a lot, and as the night of the gala drew nearer, he seemed to be retreating further into himself. Maria noticed it one evening. After they had wrapped up a meeting about the final details, James was sitting at his desk, his head resting in his hands, the weight of everything bearing down on him. Maria stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to do. She had seen him like this before, exhausted, but this time, there was something different in his eyes, a sense of quiet desperation. "James," she called softly, stepping into the room, "are you okay?" He looked up at her, his face tired, but with a small smile playing on his lips. "Just a little worn out, that's all," he replied, trying to brush it off. But Maria could see through his facade. This wasn't just about the gala, it was more. She could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken weight that he was carrying, and it tugged at her heart. "You don't have to do everything alone," Maria said quietly, taking a step closer. "You've done so much already. You don't have to keep it all inside." James's eyes softened, and for the first time in a while, he seemed to truly look at her not just as an employee or a partner in the charity, but as someone he could confide in. "I know," he said, his voice low, almost defeated. "But it's hard, Maria. I've been trying to give Ethan everything he needs. I've been focused on making sure he has the best care, the best life possible. But sometimes it feels like I'm failing him." Maria moved closer, now standing right in front of him. Her heart ached at the rawness in his voice. "You're not failing him," she said firmly. "You're doing everything you can, and you're doing it with so much love. That counts for more than anything." James looked up at her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, The world outside the office seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them in that quiet space. His gaze softened, and there was a vulnerability in it that Maria hadn't seen before. It was like a weight had been lifted from him just by her words, but there was still something unspoken hanging between them. "You've really been a godsend, Maria," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how I would have made it through these past few months without you. You've done more for me and Ethan than anyone else could." Maria felt her chest tighten, not just from his words, but from the emotions they stirred in her. She had never expected to be part of someone's life like this, not like this. They weren't just colleagues anymore, not just a people working together for a cause. There was something deeper, something more complex between them that neither of them had fully acknowledged. As he stood up, the moment shifted. The weight of the charity work, the gala preparations, and the pressure of his personal life seemed to fade for just a moment. James stepped toward her, his presence commanding, yet gentle. He wasn't just a billionaire businessman anymore. He was a father, a man trying to balance the impossible. And Maria? She was no longer just the waitress turned charity organizer. She was someone who had become intertwined in his world in a way she hadn't anticipated. But as they stood there, so close yet still uncertain, the door suddenly creaked open. The moment shattered. It was Ethan, wheeling himself into the room, his smile innocent and bright. "Dad, are we still going to the park tomorrow?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. James turned toward his son, the weight of his exhaustion returning in an instant. "Of course, buddy," he said, masking his earlier vulnerability with a loving, fatherly tone. "We'll go first thing in the morning." Ethan smiled and nodded, then rolled himself back out of the room. James watched him go, his face filled with a complex mix of love, guilt, and weariness. Maria stood there, unsure of what to say, but she knew that the moment she had just shared with James would linger in both their minds. She wasn't sure where things stood now. She wasn't sure what had changed. But what she did know was that the space between them had shifted. They had crossed a line that blurred the professional and personal, and neither of them could go back. The night of the gala arrived, and Maria was a bundle of nerves. The event had been months in the making, and everything was finally coming together. Guests were arriving. The lights sparkled against the dark sky, and the venue was filled with the sound of chatter and laughter. But despite the success, something lingered in the air. It wasn't just the excitement of the night. It was the feeling that everything was about to change. Maria stood in front of the full-length mirror in the women's restroom, adjusting the strap of her dress. She had put so much of herself into this event, and now, as she gazed at her reflection, she felt a mixture of pride and uncertainty. Tonight wasn't just about the charity, it was about the future, her future. She had taken on more responsibility, and with every success, it seemed like she was stepping deeper into James's world. But what did that really mean? The sound of heels clicking against the polished floor behind her interrupted her thoughts. Maria turned to see one of the event coordinators, a woman she had worked closely with over the past few months, walking toward her. "You look incredible, Maria," the woman said, her smile genuine. "The event is amazing. You should be proud." Maria smiled back, though her mind was elsewhere. "Thanks, but it's still not perfect. There's always something more we could have done." The woman shook her head, her eyes bright. "You've outdone yourself. I'm sure tonight's going to be a huge success." As the woman walked out, Maria looked back at her reflection. She still felt that nagging uncertainty deep in her gut. Was this all really happening? The gala was just the beginning, wasn't it? James had been there through all of it, guiding her, encouraging her, and if she was being honest, making her feel things she hadn't expected. For the first time in her life, she was torn between two worlds, the one she had known simple, predictable, and the one she was slowly falling into, where nothing was simple, and everything was changing at an overwhelming pace. The buzz of voices outside the restroom brought her back to the moment. It was time. She took a deep breath and walked out. The gala was in full swing. Guests mingled. Laughter filled the air, and the auction began. But as Maria moved through the crowd, she kept her eyes on James. He was talking to donors, shaking hands, his usual calm and collected self. But there was something different about the way he carried himself tonight. He looked exhausted, but also proud. He had always been the one to lead, to guide, but tonight, she felt as though the roles were beginning to shift. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. Maria felt a flutter in her chest, a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She had spent so many hours helping to make this night perfect, but in that instant, the only thing that mattered was the man standing across the room, James. As if on cue, he started making his way toward her. Maria felt her heartbeat quicken. Was this the moment they would finally address the unspoken things that had been building between them for weeks? When he reached her, there was a brief, almost awkward pause. Neither of them spoke immediately, but the air was thick with unspoken words. Finally, James broke the silence. "You did an amazing job tonight," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Maria smiled, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "We did it together," she replied, her voice more tentative than usual. "This is your vision, your cause." James nodded, his gaze softening. "I couldn't have done it without you." The words were simple, but there was so much more behind them. Maria could see it in the way he looked at her, something deeper, something raw. It wasn't just about work anymore. James took a step closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming, and Maria felt herself instinctively step back, as if her body was anticipating something. She hadn't realized how much of a distance had existed between them until now, and now that it was closing in, she wasn't sure how to react. "Maria," James started, his voice low, almost hesitant. He reached out, placing a hand on the back of her arm, his touch gentle, but sending a jolt of electricity through her. "I don't want you to think that this is just about the charity. I think we both know there's more between us than that." Maria's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, the professional barrier they had maintained felt irrelevant. Her feelings for him had been bubbling beneath the surface for weeks, but hearing him say it aloud made it real. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. James, I don't know what this is. I don't know if I'm ready for all of it. This life, your life, it's so different from what I've known." James looked at her, his expression soft and understanding, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a mix of concern and something else, something she couldn't quite place. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I can't help how I feel, Maria, and I don't want to walk away from this." Maria stood there, her mind racing. She had been so focused on the charity, on helping Ethan, on finding a purpose, that she hadn't fully let herself realize what was happening between her and James. But now, standing here, in the middle of this chaotic, glamorous event, it all felt like too much. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever this was between them, but she knew that walking away wasn't an option. Her voice trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, James." James stepped closer, his hands still resting on her arm, his thumb gently brushing against her skin. "I am too," he said, his voice steady. "But I'm willing to take that risk if you are." In that moment, Maria knew that everything in her life was about to change. She wasn't sure where this journey with James would take them, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face the unknown.